The great hall of the triune conclave of Xylos hung suspended in a synthesized twilight, the ambient bioluminescence of the ceiling panels casting elongated, shifting shadows across the obsidian floor. The chamber was vast, designed not merely to house assembly, but to intimidate the very concept of descent into submission. Pillars of crystallized void matter, mined from the heart of dying stars, soared upwards, their tips vanishing into the controlled atmospheric layers hundreds of meters above. At the focal point, the three high speakers of the dominant galactic powers, the Krill Ascendancy, the Signian Directorate, and the nomadic enigmatic Vec, sat upon thrones sculpted from fused planetary cores. Silence, thick and resonant with the weight of 1,000 subordinate species' anxieties, saturated the space. Before them, manifested as a shimmering, complex holographic projection that pulsed with the nervous energy of interstellar politics, floated the latest data stream regarding the Sol system incursion. Speaker Vexia of the Krill, her carapace catching the dim light in multifaceted, judgmental sheens, slowly shifted her primary auditory stalks. Her species prized order above all else, and the current situation represented an intolerable deviation from predicted cosmic mechanics. "The probe data remains inconclusive," Vexia stated, her voice a low, grinding resonance that barely disturbed the air. "Their designation, humanity, remains attached to a negligible planetary body, a third-rate world orbiting a G-class dwarf star previously catalogued as inert of any significant threat vector. Yet, their movements defy established relativistic physics models. Their energy signatures during transit are untraceable until ingress into the border systems of the Signian Protectorate. It is as if they emerge from the void itself." Beside her, Speaker Thuron of the Signian Directorate, his form a fluid tapestry of woven light contained within a stabilized energy shell, offered a projection of intellectual frustration. The Directorate prided itself on comprehensive surveillance. To be surprised was anathema to their core directive. "The term, emerge, is imprecise, Speaker Vexia. My analysts suggest a cloaking technology so advanced it borders on temporal manipulation. They do not violate known laws. They simply circumvent our observational capacity. The small reconnaissance vessels intercepted near the Rillian Nebula, mere sparks against the backdrop of our established patrols, displayed energy-dampening fields that consumed electromagnetic radiation across 8 distinct spectra simultaneously. We detected the residual heat bloom after they had passed through established intersector gates. This is not brute force. This is insidious precision." The Vec representative, known only as the Third Conduit, remained still. The Vec communicated not through vocalization within the conclave's chamber, but through controlled psychic resonance channeled into the ambient emotional field, a practice that unnerved the other two species deeply. The current resonance was a sharp, almost painful spike of caution, a primal warning against underestimation. They carry echoes of the old night. They are quiet where they should roar. The tension was amplified by the geopolitical landscape. For cycles, the Triune Empire had maintained a fragile, stratified peace, held together by mutual exhaustion from the Great Expansion Wars and a shared, unspoken fear of the unknown beyond the charted galaxies. Humanity, a species discovered only 3 standard rotations prior during a routine mapping excursion into the Perseus arm fringe, represented the first genuine unknown variable in millennia. Their emergence was not a gradual colonization. It was a sudden, sharp incursion that immediately impinged upon territories long considered secure. "Precision implies design, and design implies intent," Vexia countered, focusing her attention on the holographic map where the sparse, flickering icons representing the human contingent were marked in an offensive shade of crimson. "Their intent remains opaque. They have annexed 3 minor mining outposts, low strategic value, significant resource deposits, and have established a defensive perimeter around the 4th, the Tethys Station. They offer no communication, no demand, no declaration of sovereignty, yet they repel any attempt at diplomatic contact with extreme prejudice. 3 Directorate cruisers were neutralized when attempting standard hailing procedures. Neutralized, not merely disabled, vaporized." Thuron's light flickered, a sign of deep digital perturbation. Vaporization required energy outputs that exceed the stated capabilities of their initial scout vessels. We estimated them at Type 0 civilization parity, perhaps reaching Type 1 within a century if their resource exploitation rates continued. This suggests a fundamental miscalculation of their technological baseline. They possess weaponry capable of overwhelming established capital ship shielding arrays instantly. How do they cloak their approach? And how do they deploy such concentrated destructive force without generating commensurate signatures? The third conduit projected a wave of cold, sharp analytical pressure. They do not use the available spectrums as we understand them. They do not fight in space. They manipulate the space between the points of engagement. This is not technology, this is applied metaphysics. This concept, applied metaphysics, was the core of the burgeoning panic. The Krill relied on immutable physical laws enforced by massive energy projection. The Directorate mapped reality through intricate calculations of subspace harmonics. The Vec, existing somewhat outside conventional temporal perception, still respected the boundaries of the known universe. Humanity seemed to treat those boundaries as negotiable suggestions. Vexia adjusted her stance, the faint scratching of her articulated joints echoing through the massive hall. If they are using unknown physics, the current strategy of overwhelming blockade is dangerously ineffective. We have amassed the Sentinel fleet at the edge of the contested zone. We cannot commit the full might of the Conclave's defense structure against an enemy whose capabilities are a statistical void. The Council of Elders demands a resolution that does not risk systemic failure. We must understand the why before we deploy the how. Understanding the why requires dialogue, Thuron pointed out, his luminescence dimming slightly in resignation. And they refused to engage in dialogue. We sent the formalized greeting protocols of the 7th Stellar Concord. We sent the universal mathematical language primers. We sent highly advanced cultural emulation matrices. Silence. Only when we fired a warning pulse, a standard low-yield kinetic discharge, did they respond. Not with attack, but with a single complex transmission. The transmission that contained precisely 0 identifiable language structure, Vexia pressed. Precisely. It was a sequence of highly compressed data packets, entirely abstract, overlaid with a single recurring visual motif. An image of their home sun, a yellow star, seen through a lens that seemed to depict profound age and immense struggle. The data itself, once decoded by the Directorate's most advanced quantum decryption matrices, resolved into schematics for entirely novel drive systems, theoretical energy storage solutions that violate known energy conservation principles, and most disturbingly, a detailed anatomical rendering of their own reproductive biology, utterly devoid of context or explanation. The Vec resonance sharpened, focusing the collective unease. They offered knowledge that dismantles our understanding of energy stability. They revealed their core vulnerability, their biological fragility, and then countered with secrets that could shatter the foundations of our power projection. They are either suicidally arrogant or operating on a different plane of strategic thought. The air in the chamber grew heavy with the weight of this paradox. Humans, appearing from nowhere, possessing terrifying power, yet behaving like an inscrutable, highly advanced philosophical cult dedicated to self-sabotage. The Conclave had faced conquering empires, existential threats from biological plagues, and the slow decay of star system resources. This was none of those. This felt like a test designed by a hyper-intelligent entity to gauge their capacity for lateral thinking. Weeks bled into rotations. The Sentinel fleet maintained its standoff, its immense array of plasma cannons and gravitic projectors held in check by the uncertainty of engagement. Espionage proved fruitless. Every attempt to penetrate the human perimeter resulted in the swift, silent termination of the infiltration unit, leaving no trace of the method. The political pressure on the Conclave mounted. The subordinate species, sensing weakness in the paralysis, began subtle acts of noncompliance on the far fringes of the territory. It was then, during the deepest cycle of solar stagnation on Xylos Prime, that the expected silence broke, not with weapons fire, but with communication. The primary comms array of the Conclave's central administrative satellite suddenly bloomed with a clear, structured signal. It bypassed all encryption, all firewalls, and established a direct, high-fidelity link to the assembly hall itself. The image that stabilized in the center of the chamber was startling in its simplicity. No flashing lights, no arcane symbols, no overwhelming data bursts. It was merely a visualization, a perfectly constructed, mathematically precise representation of the immediate local stellar neighborhood, overlaid with trajectory markers that detailed the current positions of every known military asset belonging to the Krill and the Directorate, including the hidden deep space resupply stations previously known. Only to the highest echelon of command. The projection was rendered in stark white light against a field of absolute black. Speaker Vexia recoiled slightly, an involuntary physical manifestation of shock, The vulnerability was absolute. They have mapped our strategic depth. They know the hidden infrastructure. Thuron's light throbbed violently. This level of infiltration required access codes reserved for the highest administrative tiers. It implies a systemic compromise beyond any theoretical threat model. The third conduit projected a sensation of profound, almost reverent dread. They did not need to hack our systems. They simply bypassed the need for systems. They observed the reality we built our systems upon and identified the underlying rule set. A single, clear voice, purely synthesized, genderless, and perfectly calm, emanated from the projection. It spoke in the high dialect of Xylos, the formalized language used only for treaties of finality and interstellar law. To the ruling bodies of the Triune Conclave, we are the human delegation. We offer cessation of current hostilities and immediate entry into structured dialogue. The Tethys station is a temporary logistical node. Its occupation is temporary, contingent upon the acceptance of the following framework. The map dissolved, replaced by a single, unblinking visual, the human representative. He was bipedal, encased in a utilitarian, matte gray environmental suit that offered no indication of rank or ornamentation. His faceplate was perfectly reflective, hiding any biological tell. Yet the presentation was not threatening. It was utterly professional, devoid of any emotional cadence that might be misconstrued as aggression or subservience. Your analysis of our capabilities is predictably flawed, the voice continued, the cadence slow, deliberate, and incredibly rational. We do not employ cloaking technology. We employ localized field suppression based on manipulation of the Casimir effect at macro scales. We do not violate physics. We utilize the physics you have deemed too costly or too difficult to exploit efficiently. Vexia, recovering her composure through sheer force of krill discipline, managed a measured response. You demonstrate an intrusive capability that we define as an act of war. Why not communicate through standard channels if your intent is negotiation? The human figure did not move. The voice responded with chilling objectivity. Standard channels are inefficient and invite protracted bureaucratic obfuscation. We observed your diplomatic history. Standard channels result in 3 rotations of protocol review, 16 subcommittee meetings, and an eventual compromise that satisfies no core objective. We bypass the inefficiency. Our objective is rapid stabilization of the disputed zone and the establishment of mutual security parameters. Time is a resource we value highly. Thuron leaned forward, his energy shell momentarily sputtering at the edges. You admit to observing our bureaucratic processes. We observed your entire recorded history accessible via electromagnetic spectrum emissions, the voice corrected gently. We cataloged your societal priorities: order, stability, resource control, and internal political equilibrium. Our initial actions were designed to force an immediate engagement on your highest decision-making level, bypassing the entrenched inertia of your lower command structures. We apologize for the resulting material damage to your assets. The neutralization of your cruisers was necessary to communicate the non-negotiable nature of our arrival. The absolute calm was more unsettling than any threat of annihilation. It suggested a species that operated entirely outside the normal parameters of fear or self-preservation anxiety that governed galactic politics. They had calculated the exact cost of losing 3 cruisers against the benefit of securing immediate high-level diplomatic access, and the trade had been accepted without hesitation. The third conduit projected a sharp wave of inquiry directed specifically at the human representative's suit. Show us the vessel that delivered this envoy. We require visual confirmation of the source. The visual projection shifted immediately. The stark black background remained, but now it was overlaid with a vast, complex schematic. It was not a ship in the conventional sense, no discernible hull, no obvious drive components, no weaponry arrays visible through conventional spectrum analysis. It was a geometric shape of impossible angles, composed of materials that seemed to absorb all incident light, yet possessed an interior volume that defied exterior measurements. This is the transport vessel, designated the Arbitrator, the human voice stated. It is currently maintaining a stationary, non-invasive orbit beyond the Tethys station perimeter. Its external profile is optimized for minimal interaction with local spacetime distortions. We require assurances that the Sentinel fleet will maintain its current relative distance for the duration of this parley. Vexia felt a cold dread crawl beneath her carapace. This wasn't a fleet. It was a singular entity of such alien design that it rendered their own massive armadas essentially obsolete artifacts. Krill military doctrine was built around overwhelming force projection based on predictable physics. This was outside the textbook. If your vessel is capable of such feats, Vexia managed, her voice retaining a facade of imperial authority, why land on a contested outpost? Why not simply integrate the entire sector into your domain instantaneously? The human paused, a deliberate, calculated moment of silence that stretched the tension to breaking point. Because integration achieved through total force is never stable, the voice returned. It breeds resentment, necessitates constant policing, and consumes resources exponentially. We do not seek conquest. We seek partnership based on mutual comprehension. We understand the fragility of large, stratified political entities. We have observed that the greatest threats to stability often originate from internal systemic decay, not external aggression. We require a partner in this sector capable of recognizing reality outside of self-imposed limitations. The arrogance of the statement, that the entire political structure of the millennia-old triune conclave was fundamentally flawed, was breathtaking. Yet, the sheer, undeniable power demonstrated by the arbitrator projection lent the critique an unnerving validity. Partnership, Thuron echoed, the concept feeling alien on his synthesized tongue. What do you offer in exchange for the immediate cessation of blockade and recognition of your logistical node at Tethys? The image shifted again. Now the projection displayed a hyper-detailed structural diagram of the Tethys station itself, not as it was currently occupied by the humans, but as it could be. New, elegant conduits snaked across the structure, integrating superconducting alloys the Directorate had only theorized about. Energy output projections showed a threefold increase in station efficiency with near-zero waste heat. We offer optimization, the human replied. We offer physics that expand your capacity without increasing your existential risk profile. The Tethys station currently utilizes outdated matter conversion technology. We will upgrade it to a Type II energy nexus within one standard rotation, effectively solving the power deficit crises affecting your outer rim colonies for the next 500 cycles. In return, we require unrestricted, non-interfered access to the core worlds of the Conclave for scientific observation and resource exchange, conducted under mutually agreed upon, transparent oversight. The request was audacious, an immediate, deep penetration into the heart of the Empire in exchange for technological gifts. It was a classic hegemonic move, yet delivered with the unsettling tone of an ethical exchange. Vexia addressed the conduit, needing the Vex perspective on this psychological warfare. Conduit, their proposal smells of annexation masked by benevolence. Assess the sincerity. The third conduit's resonance was complex, a swirling mass of historical recall and immediate threat assessment. The core of their offering is not technological superiority, but clarity. They see the flaws in our structure because they are not bound by them. They are terrifyingly unburdened by tradition. Sincerity is irrelevant. Their stated capabilities appear genuine. Accepting the exchange buys time and knowledge. Rejecting it guarantees conflict with an adversary whose primary advantage is surprise. Vexia made her decision, a calculation based not on honor, but on cold survival. We accept the terms of the preliminary dialogue. The Sentinel fleet will assume a holding pattern, maintaining passive sensor profiles only. You have 30 standard rotations to present your full case for integration, Ambassador. We are not ambassadors, the human corrected, the visual representation returning to the impassive gray suit. We are the Forward Observation Group. My designation is Designated Primary Contact Echo. We await your invitation to your central diplomatic locus. The challenge was implicit. We will not wait for you to approach us. You will come to us, or we will proceed to you, but the negotiation will occur on terms that allow for absolute transparency of our intent. The Xylo's prime hall fell silent once more, but the silence was fundamentally changed. It was no longer the silence of arrogance. It was the silence of profound, systemic reevaluation. The journey to the Conclave's primary seat of power, Xylo's Alpha, was conducted under a veil of unprecedented political secrecy. The Krill, the Directorate, and the Vec dispatched their highest administrative delegates aboard shielded, archaic vessels, ships whose signatures were D. Illiberately loud and complex, designed to advertise their presence and their adherence to known physics. This was a deliberate concession to the humans, a symbolic gesture intended to soothe the latent paranoia generated by the arbitrator's near invisibility. The human contingent, however, arrived with startling contrast. They did not utilize the established warp conduits or the carefully mapped hyperspace lanes favored by the conclave. Instead, 3 objects materialized on the edge of the system defense perimeter simultaneously. They were not the massive, intimidating battle wagons expected, nor were they the sleek, fast scouts of the initial incursion. They were geometric anchors of pure, matte black, resembling enormous, complex tessellations rather than vessels. They generated no drive signature, no heat bloom, and minimal gravitic distortion. They simply were there, occupying space as if they had always been intended to occupy that precise coordinate. The Krill delegation, observing from the orbiting command station, noted that the appearance of these 3 anchors coincided precisely with the moment the lead Directorate diplomatic vessel activated its heavily encrypted long-range comms beacon. It was a display of absolute, non-verbal coordination. The designated landing zone was a vast, climate-controlled diplomatic mesa on the surface of Xylos Alpha, usually reserved for summit meetings between major planetary governors. As the human envoy emerged from the central anchor, which somehow folded itself into a small, mobile transport configuration, the delegates of the conclave observed the human concept of power projection firsthand. There were precisely 7 humans present. They wore the same functional gray suits, unadorned, suggesting absolute equality or absolute anonymity among the group. They did not scan the environment, did not deploy perimeter guards, and did not display any overt weaponry. They simply walked onto the mesa, the exotic materials of their landing zone remaining utterly untouched by their presence. Vexia, leading the Krill contingent, stood at the forefront, her posture rigid, flanked by armored honor guards whose weapons were set to stun only, a humiliating concession. Thuron arrived separately, his light form projecting an aura of intense, almost painful calculation. The third conduit was represented by a single, silent Vec operative whose metallic skin was absorbing the ambient light, making him a void within the already shadowed twilight of the mesa. "We welcome the forward observation group to Xylos Alpha," Vexia stated, her voice echoing slightly due to the atmospheric difference between the Krill home world and the conclave center. "We have suspended all military operations within the contested sector. We await the declaration of your objectives." The primary contact, Echo, the human who had spoken previously, stepped slightly forward. He raised one hand, the movement slow and precise, a gesture that in the context of interstellar signaling was almost universally understood as a request for pause. "We acknowledge the cessation of hostilities," the Echo stated, the synthesized voice carrying clearly. "We acknowledge the gesture of utilizing established transport methods for this meeting. However, before objectives are presented, we must establish a shared context for the negotiation. The greatest threat to any enduring coalition is not external force, but internal philosophical disparity. We must ensure that our definitions of security, progress, and existence align sufficiently to prevent catastrophic misinterpretation." Thuron allowed a projection of confusion to emanate from his energy shell. "That is the function of established diplomatic protocol, Echo. We spend cycles defining terms." "Cycles you cannot afford," the Echo countered, entirely without malice. "Your civilization models suggest that your current resource allocation strategy, combined with the burgeoning climate instability on the peripheral worlds under Krill administration, will result in localized civil collapse within 80 rotations. Furthermore, the Directorate's reliance on quantum entanglement for its instantaneous communications network has exposed its core routing architecture to predictable algorithmic decay, creating a critical vulnerability that will manifest as catastrophic signal loss within 120 rotations." The silence that followed was absolute. The data presented was specific, detailed, and targeted at the deepest, most sensitive operational vulnerabilities of the 2 dominant powers. Vulnerabilities that official intelligence bureaus had only tentatively identified or actively suppressed for political expediency. Vexia felt a cold sweat bead beneath her carapace joints. The Krill sector instability was a political embarrassment, actively hidden from the majority of the conclave. Thuron's reaction was visible. His light flickered wildly, evidence of his internal stems scrambling to verify the data stream the humans had just casually broadcast into the shared channel. "How," Vexia demanded, her voice tight, "did you acquire precise, highly classified data regarding the structural integrity of the Directorate's core network?" The echo turned slightly towards Thuron, acknowledging the Directorate speaker. "We did not acquire it. We observed the stresses inherent in the design as it propagated through spacetime when the network was utilized. It is fundamental mathematics, Speaker Thuron. You built a magnificent structure based on flawed geometric assumptions regarding the stability of localized entanglement fields under variable dark energy flux. We merely calculated the failure point." The Vec conduit resonated with a low, steady hum, not fear but intense focus. "They do not spy, they read the blueprint of reality itself." The echo then addressed the conduit directly. "Vec representative, we understand your civilization exists partially outside linear causality. Your primary vulnerability is not systemic collapse, but entrenchment. You have become so adept at navigating the possibilities of the near future that you fail to prepare for the absolute improbability, the true statistical zero events that occasionally manifest." The human paused, then delivered the true philosophical core of their unexpected arrival. "We are humanity. We are, by galactic standards, young. We have endured the crucible of a Type 0 civilization transitioning into Type 1 under conditions of extreme planetary stress and near-total resource deprivation. We did not emerge from comfortable stability or inherited technological paradigms. We fought gravity, chemistry, and our own biology every single cycle. When a species is forced to innovate out of desperation, it learns to look for solutions where established powers, those who have forgotten how to starve, will not." He spread his hands, the gesture calm. "We are defined by our desperation and our capacity for illogical, high-risk adaptation. You fear us because we do not adhere to your models of rational growth. We are the anomaly that successful civilizations rarely survive encountering." Thuron slowly regained control of his presentation. "If you are not here to conquer, and your analysis of our impending doom is accurate, what precisely is the nature of this partnership? We refuse to become dependents on a newly arrived species." "Dependence is a function of unequal exchange," the echo replied. "We require a foothold, a secure laboratory, and access to your established infrastructure to rapidly scale our operations. In exchange, we offer solutions to the very instabilities we have cataloged. We offer stability born from the understanding of necessary, rapid change." He gestured toward the three matte black anchors floating patiently above. "The vessel you designated the Arbitrator is merely the deployment sheath. Our true fleet is not visible because it is not designed for war, nor for transportation along familiar vectors." This was the moment the conclave had been dreading, the reveal of the hidden asset. The air pressure on the mesa dropped infinitesimally as the human network projected the next visual. It was not a weapon or a ship. It was an image of the structure itself. The schematic displayed was breathtakingly complex, defying even the Vec's capacity to instantly parse its function. It depicted a vast, almost unimaginable structure, spanning light years, existing entirely within a constructed, localized fold of spacetime. It was not a fleet. It was a mobile ecosystem, a self-contained pocket universe. "This structure," the echo explained, his voice deepening with a gravity that transcended the synthesized quality, "is what facilitated our transition from a Type 0 to our current operational status. We did not build this with conventional fusion reactors or standard matter compression. We built it utilizing technologies recovered from the edge of the known universe, the remnants of prior, failed galactic cycles." Vexia stared, her optical sensors struggling to process the scale. That is not possible. The energy requirements alone are irrelevant," the echo interrupted, not rudely, but as a statement of fact against an outdated premise. "The structure is not powered by energy in the conventional sense. It utilizes the ambient gravitational potential differential across vast distances, stabilized and channeled through exotic matter scaffolding. We call it a stellar nursery, but it is more accurately described as a mobile, self-sustaining industrial habitat capable of fabricating entire capital-class vessels in the span of a standard month, requiring only proximity to stellar bodies for initial seeding." This was the technological reveal. Humanity had not just found a clever new engine, they had effectively weaponized stellar engineering on a scale that dwarfed the established powers. The Krill's massive, slow to construct. Readnoughts suddenly seemed like children's toys compared to a mobile fabrication reality. The three anchors you see above, the Echo continued, are merely docking points, stabilizers for the local spacetime bubble containing the nursery. The nursery itself is currently positioned at the edge of the local Uit cloud, drawing minimal, highly controlled energy from your distant sun. We are not threatening your core worlds. We are positioning our primary manufacturing base in an area you deemed strategically irrelevant. Thuron was momentarily stunned into silence, his light dimming to a weak pulse. The Directorate's entire economic model was based on controlled distribution of refined materials, the laborious process of mining and refining being the foundation of their power. Humanity had bypassed the entire process. If this nursery can fabricate capital vessels so rapidly, Thuron managed, why did you only deploy 3 small scout vessels initially? To test your capacity for threat assessment and to determine the speed of your political response, the Echo clarified. A species that responds to a subtle probe with massive energy-intensive mobilization is one that prioritizes defense over adaptability. A species that hesitates, attempting to decipher the threat vector before deploying overwhelming force, is one that understands the value of strategic patience, and thus, one capable of partnership. The Vec conduit resonated with an unusual sound, not dread but a strange form of recognition. They were gauging our flexibility, they were mapping our fear. Our objective, the Echo summarized, leveling his impassive gaze across the 3 delegates, is to secure sufficient resources, primarily heavy isotopes and rare earth elements currently sitting unused in the asteroid belts you label as non-viable, to maintain and expand the nursery. In exchange for access to these materials, we guarantee the systemic stabilization of your empire, correcting the endemic flaws in your infrastructure and defense paradigms. We offer you the opportunity to skip the next 3 centuries of technological struggle. Vexia knew the negotiation was over before it truly began. Refusal meant immediate, unilateral war against a species capable of manufacturing armies in a month using energy sources that rendered conventional warfare obsolete. Acceptance meant submission to an unprecedented level of internal scrutiny, but also salvation from the impending systemic failures already identified. We accept the initial terms of access, Vexia stated, the words tasting like ash. The Tethys station is formally designated a neutral logistics zone under joint oversight. We will grant your resource extraction teams access to the designated orbital fields bordering the Rillian Nebula. The Echo gave the closest approximation to a nod possible within the confines of the helmet. Agreed. We begin calibration immediately. We require 3 senior engineers from the Directorate and 3 strategic planners from the Krill Ascendancy to accompany our lead design specialist to the Tethys node within 1 cycle for observational exchange. Transparency is mandatory. The delegates slowly dispersed, leaving the human envoy standing alone on the mesa. The Krill and Cygnian factions retreated to their respective command vessels, their internal communications filled with a mixture of panic and desperate analysis. The Vec operative remained. As the others departed, the Vec took 2 slow, deliberate steps towards the primary contact Echo. The Vec did not use the comms array. The communication was direct, bypassing the air, the suits, and the synthesized voice. It was a pure thought projected into the mind of the human envoy. You present yourselves as saviors utilizing salvaged relics of a previous epoch. You speak of stability through radical adaptation. But the structure you call the nursery, it is not a fabrication tool. It is an ark. You are not building a fleet. You are building an escape pod. What horror are you preparing for? The primary contact Echo remained utterly still for a long, profound moment, the reflective visor mirroring the dying light of Xylo's Alpha's twin moons. The synthesized voice, when it finally returned, carried a weight far exceeding the previous professional calculation, a somber acknowledgement of a shared cosmic burden. Vec Conduit, you perceive beyond the immediate political skirmish. That is why we permitted your observation, and why we allowed the Directorate and the Krill to remain blissfully unaware of your specific presence here. The nursery is indeed an ark. We did not come to conquer the Triune Empire, because the Triune Empire in its current configuration will not survive the next galactic epoch. The Echo then fixed his gaze on the retreating Cygnian vessel, a beacon of intricate, familiar technology. The instability we pointed out in the Directorate's entanglement network, It is not merely decay. It is an NG pattern of distortion that cancels entanglement coherence across vast distances. The instability in the krill outer rims is not climate change. It is an accelerating gravitational decay caused by an external, unknown influence pulling mass away from those regions. He paused, allowing the horror of the realization to settle into the Vec's ancient mind. We are not facing an enemy that arrives in ships, conduit. We are facing an enemy defined by silence, an entity or force that is systematically, slowly, and fundamentally dismantling the established laws of physics across this arm of the galaxy. It is not an invasion. It is a rollback. Everything you have built, your physics, your empires, your very notion of stable space, is being edited out of existence. The Vec resonated a single, sharp word of inquiry. What? We do not know its origin, only its effect, the echo confirmed. We call it the scourge of entropy. Our ancestors survived the last known manifestation of this effect by hiding in the void, compressing their civilization into a mobile habitat capable of existing where space-time integrity is not guaranteed. We are here to offer the remaining viable species a chance to join us in that deep void shelter. The nursery can sustain the essential biological and cultural knowledge of several species, provided they are willing to shed the limitations of their current political forms. The cosmic twist was revealed. The true crisis was not the emergence of humanity, but the impending, silent death of the known universe for anyone left behind. Humanity was not the threat. They were the highly unconventional, brutally honest survivalists offering a single, desperate lifeboat. We offer you the knowledge of the Voidark, conduit. Will the Vec join the survival contingent, or will you remain to observe the final, elegant erasure of your history? The Vec operative stood motionless beneath the alien twilight, absorbing the terrible truth. The arrogant powers of the conclave would squabble over the terms of technological integration until the very fabric of their reality unraveled around them. Humanity, born from struggle, understood that survival was not about maintaining power. It was about adapting until the shape of reality itself changed. The choice was stark: evolution into a form capable of surviving the impossible, or graceful dissolution into the quiet nothingness that was rapidly approaching the familiar stars. The age of empire was over. The age of desperate, unified flight had just begun.